So the first question I'll ask you before I go through the questions, Your Grace, is if we should be humble through our motives, is it wrong to try developing that mindset through actions such as serving those around you while battling thoughts?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. So the fathers of the church, they talk about επιγνωμονική ταπείνωση, about, that was the Greek term, the ancient Greek term, επιγνωμονική ταπείνωση. Let's try and put it in words in English. So it's like basically what you just described, trying through our own will to keep ourselves humble. And when we do that, then God provides, and eventually we get a mindset which is at least not selfish. The thing is, we need to have a rough understanding of our emotional and sometimes of our even physical limitations. It's very important. I always come back to this. We need to know our limits. And why do I say this? Because as a young monk in Mount Athos, I was trying my best, not thinking that I was doing anything important. But then I got exhausted to the point that it took me 6 years to recover. So we need to know our limits. Otherwise, if we do more than what we physically can, it's not going to work. And of course, God, if we are simple, if we have a simple heart, if we do it out of our goodness of our heart, God will bless it. But it's good if we know our limits. And it's not just our physical limits, but also our emotional limits. So let's say that there is a couple and the husband is very aggressive and tells off the wife all the time. And the wife, or it could be the other way around, the wife is always trying to be humble. That's a good thing. But we need to look into how much this person can take. Because if this person gets damaged, and if, like parents do this without even understanding it sometimes, when they tell off their kids all the time, they damage their self-esteem. And having a low self-esteem, it doesn't mean the person is humble. It means that the person is damaged. There is a big difference there. The person needs a healthy self-esteem to be able to give themselves to God. We don't need to be damaged to give ourselves to God. Because if we are damaged, I know examples of very strict parents. They kept their daughter like not going anywhere, not doing anything. She got married young, very Christian family, an amazing family. 10 years down the track, the husband, the wife, the 2 kids, they went for a trip in Greece. She started going out with some of her girlfriends, and she ended up divorced and trying to live the life that she didn't live as a teenager. Why? Because her self-esteem was damaged, and then the priorities, they play up in our mind. And humans are sensitive, and that's partly, a big part of it, it's the parents' fault. So we need to understand our limits, and we need to understand how much I can take. And when I can't take anymore, not because I don't want to, because as a human I have limits. When I start bleeding, I have to do something about it, otherwise the wound might be infected and I might get worse, and it might be then out of my control and my health might be in danger. The same thing, if I feel that I can't take it anymore, not because I'm not humble, because these are my limits. The humble thing is to know my limits and do something in a humble way about it. It's not to be a punching bag. This is not humble. Sorry, but this is dumb. Not because because of any other reason, but because it will end up in something which is not good for no one. Usually when there is something humble, it ends up being good for everyone. But and I will tell you one more thing. Emilianos used to say that if there is a proud person, he does or she does something to you, and you out of humility say to them, forgive me, although it was their fault, if you humble yourself in front of a proud person, Emilianos was saying that you make them a devil, because you encourage their ego and they think they can get away with it and they will keep doing it, and it's like you promote a behavior which will damage more people and damages the person's soul as well, the proud person's soul as well. I'm not sure if you understand that.
Yes. Thank you, Your Grace. So this question presupposes someone knows about Elder Emilianos. Elder Emilianos says that man's salvation comes down to a simple decision, to accept or reject God. And similarly, another elder says that the question is not what one does, but the position one takes in one's deeper being before God. What was his stance or position before God? To be who he was. How do we change our stance before God in a permanent way?
Well, if the question is what was the position of Gerda Emilianos in front of God, did I understand correctly, Father?
I think the question was what was his stance and how do we have a similar stance?
So something that's what I understand, right? Because I'm not him, I cannot talk on his behalf, and only God knows the perfect response to that. However, my understanding was that Gerda Emilianos was doing exactly that. In the book that we put together, Conversations with Christ, which is a big book explaining St. John's Holy Gospel. It's available on Amazon in English. It's written in English. Conversations with Christ, Living the Holy Gospel According to St. John. That's the full title. So in there, I have a poem that I wrote when I was a young monk for Gerda Emilianos. And in one of the lines, it says that είχε ταπείνωση κρυφή, ποθούσε όλος διόλου, σαν τον Χριστό να σταυρωθεί, ώστε την Εκκλησιά να δει κατάφορτη ξανά. So he had hidden humility. He desired with all his heart to be crucified like Christ in order to see the church fruitful again. So Gerda Emilianos had this hidden humility, which was exactly what we spoke about, this self-emptiness. So what was his approach in front of God? How was he standing in front of God? I guess he was standing so empty in front of God that God filled him up with his Holy Spirit to the extent that not many people, not many saints, in my opinion, have done. And he was so humble when we spoke before about humility. Christ's humility made him go through crucifixion and death. So he was so humble that I believe that his disease that he had for a very long period of time towards the end of his life, it was not because he was paying for his own sins, but it was because he was paying for his children's sins. And this makes him very unique. By saying these things, I don't think it's easy for us to stand like that in front of God. And again, like St. Paisios, he would ask to get cancer in order for someone else to be healthy. This is the approach. This is the level of self-emptiness. I do not advise anyone to ask for such things, because if they were to happen, we will regret it. So we need to ask for things according to our limits again, and that's the humble thing to do. And if you want to be humble, you can try, as we said yesterday as well, ask for humility, and you will see. You will see what happens. Yes.
Thank you, Your Grace. Can you speak about, we already touched on the subject, but I think this is a good one for us. Can you speak about true humility versus low confidence or self-esteem?
Yes. True humility versus low confidence.
Or low self-esteem.
I think we touched based on that. But basically, low confidence and low self-esteem, it means that we're not free from our feelings. We're not free from what we are preoccupied with. And it could be because our environment taught us that we're not good enough, or it could be because we convinced ourselves through a number of events in our lives that we're not good enough, and that's what we believe. So my father, personally, he wasn't an easy person. He was a very difficult person, like you couldn't believe. And he was like very barbaric in his attitude towards me. He used to hit me a lot. He used to tell me off when it was not my fault. Basically, he didn't mean to. I'm not blaming him, and may God rest his soul. But he did his best without understanding it to make me have a very low self-esteem. He didn't mean to. That's what he understood. That's what he did. I'm not here to judge him. I hope he's in a good place. But that's what he did. He managed to make me have a very low self-esteem. Then I met Emilianos. He didn't try to reverse anything, but he did. But he didn't try to reverse anything. All he did was to love me. All he did was to accept me. All he did was to encourage me to be my full personal potential. That's all he did. And this not only cured me, but it gave me such stability inside me that no one can convince me now that I'm not doing God's will. No one can tell me that I'm wrong, not because I would have a problem admitting that I'm wrong, but because I know that if I'm wrong, I will be the first one to say to God, sorry, I didn't mean to, whatever, if I need to pay, whatever, just move on, we fix it. I have a relationship. I'm not afraid if I have a relationship to tell God, look, I've done something wrong. But Emilianos' love, unconditional love, faith in me, and embracing made me get rid of my low self-esteem that I had to a degree, not because of my fault, but because of the way I was raised. And this is how then I can personally empty myself now and give my whole existence to God, not so that I become a saint, but so that I can take care of others. This is the humility we spoke about, Christ's humility, the self-emptiness, not what looks humble, what it is empty, meaning nothing. You can't go below nothing. But for me to be nothing, I need to possess myself. I need to fix my self-esteem through a way for me, this way, which I didn't even dream about, but it just happened, it was Hierdes Emilianos. And once I fix that, once I come to the ground level, once I possess myself, then I can be humble. Then I can give myself to God. Then I can empty myself. I can't empty myself when I have low self-esteem. It doesn't work. I'm not sure if this is sufficient.
Yes, thank you, Your Grace. Next question is, it's a little bit long, but it's simple. I mean, not simple, but you'll get the idea. What advice can you offer to a newly married couple where one or both spouses are experiencing anxiety or hesitancy to have children due to having not necessarily acquired everything they may have hoped to achieve academically, financially, or materially? And what can I do as a husband to strengthen and encourage my wife?
Every family is different. Every case is different. Every scenario is unique. We can't just give a prescription for everyone. A doctor wouldn't do that. A responsible doctor. So when we deal with such issues, we need to have the same spiritual father and go and talk to him, and he will give us the instructions. However, I would say that perfectionism is not a virtue. And I understand when some people, they want to have everything ready, but perfectionism is not a virtue. And if one of the two in the marriage is a perfectionist, this could potentially drive the other person crazy. Like they can't do anything which is good enough. I don't think this is the case with the question, and I understand what they ask. However, I don't want to take the place of the couple's spiritual father and respond on his behalf, because it's not my place to do. So I just say these general things, and people, they need to get advice from their spiritual father. And I'm saying this because in the Orthodox Church, there are different approaches on many things. For example, when I was studying theology as a monk in Thessaloniki, there was a novice monk from Simonopetra who was studying there as well with me, and his father was a priest. And the subject came up one day about, I don't even know how to say it in English, Patrick, you might need to help me, οικογενειακός προγραμματισμός.
Family planning?
Family planning, yes, I guess. Which I never heard of it before, and it meant that they plan when to have children, right, Father?
Yes.
Is this what it is?
Yes.
Yes. So the first time in my life I heard this expression, I was not married, I didn't know about it, and I thought, wow, there is such a thing, and the Orthodox Church allows it. So there are some spiritual fathers that they allow it. I had a couple who were my spiritual children as an abbot when I was the abbot in Perth, and they had like half a dozen of kids, and they were very tired, they couldn't do anymore. And the wife asked me, she was my spiritual child, what can we do about it? But before I gave my advice, I actually went to Greece and I asked Hierode Eliseo what his opinion was, because I didn't want to do my own thing there and express my own opinion. I wanted something more traditional, something that is coming from the fathers of the church. But before I even gave my response, they went to a female monastery for a visit, and the abbess there advised the wife and said, you have half a dozen of kids, of course you should stop having kids. And she came back, she said this to me, and I said to her, I don't know what to say, I have to ask. It wasn't my field, right? So I asked, and the response that I got was something tailored to their shoes. I'm not going to say what it was because it doesn't matter. But my point is, ask your spiritual fathers. I don't want to take their place in your life. I don't want to tell you something which is different from what they tell you. But what I want to tell you is that in the Orthodox Church, you will find different approaches on that. There is the approach that you should have as many kids as God gives you. My grandfather's family was like 13 kids, one of them died, 12. And the other approach is that if you were to have 12 kids and you're a wreck emotionally and you can't raise them, how good is this to them? So I'm not giving you a response, but I'm telling you to find a spiritual father who understands you. And as we said yesterday, we need to find a spiritual father we are comfortable with and then be obedient to them. And that's my response.
Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you, Your Grace. Next question. From what I notice in current time, parents and relatives are more often overpraising their children, not under-supporting them. Do you notice this? And if so, what advice can you give on the matter?
Yes. It does happen. Overpraising the children, it does happen. And it makes the children live in a bubble. And then the bubble at some point bursts, and the kids, they don't know what to do and how to act and how to be. So it is an issue. However, I will tell you this. If I see something good in my spiritual children, which is the same with people with their physical children, I do mention it, not always, sometimes I do mention it to them, and I compliment them. I say, well done, and I say to them that I'm proud of them, because this helps them understand that they did something right. This helps them understand that I appreciate them. And of course, this will be the reality. I will not say whatever. And I do it especially when I have spiritual children with low self-esteem, to bring them to the ground level. If they're not in the ground level, they can't freely give themselves to God. So they need to be in the ground level, at least. And people with low self-esteem, they struggle with that. But of course, overdoing it and not being realistic, it doesn't help. And we need, as parents, spiritual parents and physical parents, we need to have a balance on that. Otherwise, both extremes could be damaging, and it's not the best approach.
Thank you, Your Grace. Your blessing, this is also kind of a lengthy question, but it's relatively direct. Your blessing, Yoronda, in light of the increasingly turbulent climate in the world and the growing sense among many contemporary Holy Fathers that a great conflict among the nations may be looming, which seems almost inevitable now, I find myself contemplating how best to prepare for such uncertain times. Is it considered a sin to doomsday prep, such as stockpiling food, supplies, and survival gear? And if allowed, how can I keep such preparations grounded in humility, trust in God, and concern for others rather than anxiety? What are your thoughts on World War III?
Believe it or not, before I joined the Brotherhood of Simonopetra, I thought that something's going to happen, so I have to rush. And it helped me. I went to the monastery, not because of that, but it was a helpful thing. It's like the airplane flies and the wind helps the flight. You arrive there 20 minutes earlier. That's good enough. So, Saint Paisios says, if there is a third world war and your brothers are dying, are you going to enjoy the rice that you will have stored? So that's one approach. The other approach is that you get some rice and you store it, but then it might grow fleas, whatever it grows. Huh? Moths, worms, whatever it is. Yes. And another approach will be, why not? I don't disagree with any of those, and I will tell you why. because to me, I found myself in occasions that I didn't know what will happen next. And I realized that the priority is not to provide for myself, but the priority is to have the connection with God so that He will provide for me. So a couple of years ago, I nearly died a few times, like literally. But one of those times was when I felt my stomach, there was something funny. I have a high pain threshold, so I didn't really worry too much, like it was not something very obvious. Then I managed to drive myself to the emergency, and they told me, look, your appendix is burst and you have to stay here for an operation today. As simple as that. But that was not the threat life threat that I want to talk about. This was one of them, but not the one I would want to talk about. So I was last on the list for the operation of the day, and I was waiting outside of the theater. The anesthetist came, she gave me a pre-anesthetic, and she went inside to prepare. They were running late, like 10 p.m. And I had an allergic reaction and my breath stopped. That's what I want to say, I want to talk about. And I've talked about it before. So at this point, I said to God, I said, if you want to take me, take me. What is going to happen to my spiritual children? Because some of them, I thought that they're not mature enough. And when I said this, I started breathing again. And I realized that the rest of my days, they're not about me, they're about everyone else. And that's why I'm alive. So when we see life from such a perspective, you can have rice or you might not have rice. Who cares? If God wants you to live, you will live. If God doesn't want you to live, you won't live. If you forgot to get the rice on time and your neighbor has some, God can inspire them to bring you some. If anything, I saw the icon of Prophet Elijah here, which I really liked. And it reminds me a passage from the Old Testament. Prophet Elijah and the prophets, they were very rough people. It was rough times. So he killed so many false prophets, like he slaughtered them. Very tough personality, God help us. And at some point, he didn't have food. And God sent him food through a crow. Right? They say that the crow doesn't even feed their own little ones. That's how cold animals they are. And God wanted to teach him a lesson. If I want you to be alive, I can keep you alive through ways that you can't even imagine. And this is what God taught him. So by all means, provide for your families. I'm not telling you not to provide. However, what you must provide for yourself first is your relationship with your Creator. And if your Creator says that your end is not there yet, it's not. Rice or no rice. And if your Creator says that your children will survive, they will, whether you have water or not. But you can, by all means, store whatever you can. I don't have an objection with that. And that's my response.
Thank you, Chris. Are we doing okay on time, roughly?
Half an hour, yeah.
If a truly humble action is a natural action, how would we begin to strive to be more humble, since it might not always be our first instinct?
So, how do you understand this question, Father, yourself?
How I am understanding is that you mentioned that, like St. Paisios, he just did what came naturally, and it was humility. But if we know that we're not humble, how can we start developing it to the point where it just comes naturally and it's not something we're like, trying to cultivate.
Yes. So we can do what we said before about epignomονική ταπείνωση, willingly trying to keep ourselves humble, but also we can do what we also talked about, to pray about humility, and good luck to us because God listens to these prayers. And a lot of things will happen that we won't be happy about if we have a big ego. But the third thing is that a fruit naturally matures on time while it stays on the tree. Meaning there will be life challenges that God will allow, that they will naturally help us mature spiritually and become more humble. And this is a natural process. So eventually it happens. If our hearts are open, eventually it happens. It's like we are growing slowly, and then one day we look in the mirror, if we haven't looked for a while, and we are like, wow. So what I'm saying is that we're doing what we're doing. We're praying, we're trying to stay close to God, and then one day someone tries to insult us, and we think to ourselves, what a poor soul, they don't understand any better. We don't get offended. We don't take it personally. This is a proof that we have grown spiritually and that we are more humble without even understanding how, by trying to increase our connection with God, and this connection by itself gives us the attributes that Christ has, and one of them is humility.
Can I say one thing?
Of course.
So I laugh because His grace said that if we want humility, if we pray for humility, God will provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've experienced that in many different ways.
Who hasn't? Yeah.
So I came up with an expression, God, humble me by your grace. Not necessarily by trials, because
yes.
I've had enough of them. So humble me, O God, by your grace. Anyways. The next question is, how can you use being very sensitive towards being humble instead of being hurt and betrayed when someone slanders, backstabs, hurts you?
How can we?
I guess the question is, if someone is a sensitive soul, how can they turn that sensitivity into humility rather than being hurt, feeling hurt when people are mean to them?
Certain level of sensitivity is understandable when we have a certain way of being raised. So, as I said, my dad used to put me down all the time, and I became sensitive because I was not receiving a lot of love growing up. However, oversensitivity, we need to keep in mind that oversensitivity could also be an indication of pride. It's like we encourage our sensitivity in order to attract attention, and that's not a healthy quality. And the question is, how can we turn this into humility, right?
Yes.
All right, how do we turn sensitivity into humility? Again, I will say that nipsis helps in the sense that if we are focused on God, if we are focused on our connection with God, what happens around us doesn't bother us. So eventually we understand that we have to stop taking things personally and understand that when people insult us or they hurt us or they say things that they indicate their ego, this is their problem. Not in the sense that it's their problem. They have a problem. So whatever we have inside us, this is what we spread around us. If I'm peaceful, I will spread peace around me. If I am prideful, I will spread insecurity around me, because this is what I have inside me. Anyway, so basically, by strengthening my connection with God, I become stronger spiritually, and these sensitivities, slowly, they become less and less. This is what I think, Father.
Thank you, Your Grace. So I have a two-part question here. What left the biggest, or some of the biggest impressions to you about Elder Emilianos and the way he interacted with people and carried himself? And then the other question is, what are some of your favorite saints and why? So the first one is the impression of Elder Emilianos' communication with others, and then something more general about your favorite saints.
There are a couple of things that I've shared before about Elder Emiliano, and it's not how he interacted with others, but how he interacted with me. So, for example, when I told him that I was a young novice, I think, not even wearing black clothes yet, because in Simonopetra the novices, they wear normal clothes so that they will feel free to live whenever they want before they become monks. Anyway, so when I told him, Yeroda, the more the time passes, the more I get connected with you. And I thought I said something good. And he got upset and he told me, I will never do anything for you to be connected with me. And this is a result of his self-emptiness again. And I understand it the way St. John the Forerunner, when he realized who Christ was, he told his disciples, there, follow him. Forget about me, follow him. So Gerdas Emilianos was telling us basically, I'm not here to connect you with me, I'm here to connect you with God. And he would do anything for his spiritual children. This is another thing very important, and I will stop with that because we won't have time for much more. There are more questions. So he would do anything to help his spiritual children become spiritual fathers. Meaning, I don't want you guys to be forever spiritual infants. I want you to have discernment. I want you to grow spiritually. I want you to be better than me. I don't want to be your boss. I want you to be better than me. So I want Father Christo to be better than me. Right? And that's it. That's it. Who are my favorite saints and why?
Yes.
I will say, how many saints should I mention? All right, one of my very favorites, and it's not because I favorite him, but I think that he favorited me, and then I realized, and I'm trying to return the favor in a way. It's St. Gregory Palamas. And you might ask why. So my tonsure from Gerda Emilianos was on his name day, 14th of November, with the new calendar. Of course, I was tonsured in Mount Athos with the old calendar, and it was 1st of November. But why do I say that Gerdas Emilianos chose this date? Because in the old calendar was 1st of November, in the new calendar was 14th, St. Gregory's name day, but Gerdas Emilianos, in his talk on my tonsure, it was 3 of us together, he spoke about the uncreated energies of God, which is St. Gregory Palamas' teaching. So basically, he connected me with St. Gregory Palamas. And then years after, I realized that I had to study theology, and I asked for the blessing. I received the blessing. I went to Thessaloniki on my way to Kalymnos because I had to give exams again to pass. I had to give exams in the high school where I finished, in Kalymnos, to give exams to pass into theology. Anyway, it was a struggle to get to that. It was not the subjects that I was familiar with. I was in Thessaloniki. Back then you couldn't book a ticket online and buy it online. And I made a call, I reserved a ticket, I went to venerate St. Gregory Palamas' church, Holy Relic in Thessaloniki, and then I went to get the ticket, and they told me, your booking is lost. There was not even one available seat for me to fly to Kalymnos. So basically, if I was to lose one day, I would have lost my exams. I wouldn't have been able to study if I was to pass. And then I went back to St. Gregory's Palamas Church. They told me, let us look for half an hour and come back. I prayed, I went there, I prayed. And it was like, I don't know how this will sound, but it is what it is. It's like St. Gregory told me, Ευστράτιε, my name was Ευστράτιος, I was a monk. Μία θέση έχω στην εκκλησία μου. My position in the church is one. I went back. They found one position in the plane, and I went and I gave my exams. And afterwards, I got the results, and the results was from the exam was that I came first amongst all the clergy in Greece in theology. So basically, St. Gregory told me that he has one position in the church. So basically, he told me that if God has one position for you, the devil can't take it away. And that's what happened. So after that, we were always going to venerate his holy relics when we had a difficult exam. And there were occasions that he held, like there was this exam in Byzantine philosophy. Very difficult. By the way, I met Father Hieronymus the first day that I went to the theological school, and we studied together. And we went to venerate his holy relics before the exams for Byzantine philosophy, very difficult subject. We went to give exams. The way it was in the amphitheater, he was sitting next to me. He had a different subject, a different question. I had a different question. The way the questions fell, if I had his question, I would have got 0. If he had my question, he would have got 0. But we knew the other question, so we both got 10 out of 10. Yeah, that's to say that he was always there, and I didn't start this relationship, he started it. Anyway, so that's one saint. But if we continue, yeah, let's leave it to that.
Are we still okay with time? How are we doing?
Yes, keep asking.
Okay.
We didn't finish food.
Okay. So, how do we know what is from our desire and what is from God? And there's a follow-up question. To what end should we deny ourselves? When does it become acts of faith that are empty?
How do you understand the second part, Father?
Yes, the second part, I think that that's an interesting. I don't know exactly. I'm assuming that it's sometimes we can deny ourselves beyond our measure, maybe. Or how do we know how not to deny
Let's
ourselves?
start with the first one, and then we'll read the second one again.
Mhm.
So, could you read the first one again?
First one is, how do we know what is from our desire and what is from God?
When I sometimes quote Saint Paisius because he was very simple, and his responses, they are very unique. I'm not that simple, but I loved his simplicity. So when they were asking him, what does God want from me? He would say, do you even want what you want from you? So it's good if we know what we want from ourselves and then ask what God wants from us. But how do we know what is from our desire and what is from God? Sometimes we might know, sometimes we might not know to start with. But I guess if we do want to follow God's will, if we follow the peace of our heart, that's a safe path. And then we need to understand that God basically wants one thing from us, to become one with Him. Now, there are so many paths to get to that. There are so many mistakes we can do along the way, and He can still turn things upside down and make this happen if we love Him, that God does not stop in one path. Like someone can get married, someone can become a monastic, someone can get married and then whatever, or can become a monastic and then whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters for God is that we love Him. It doesn't matter how many mistakes we make in life. So as far as our conscience is clean, that we love God, we don't have to worry about it. We can rest assured that He will find a way for us to grow closer to Him. But this should be our only concern. And of course, at the beginning, we don't understand God's will. It's like we try to follow God and we follow like a shadow, but then it becomes more clear, and then we understand more. It's a process. We shouldn't be afraid of the process. We shouldn't be afraid of our mistakes. Emilianos was never afraid of our mistakes. We shouldn't be afraid of our mistakes. If we have made a mistake, acknowledge it, and we keep going. And then, what do we do with the second question?
Yeah. I think maybe this is the point. To what extent should we deny ourselves?
To the extent that we can handle. We've spoke about it before. To the extent that I don't destroy myself. So when it comes to dealing with things, I would say give 95% of your strength and not 110. Why? Because sometimes the devil would hit us when it hurts, and if we're exhausted, we won't be able to do something about it. So give 95% of our strength. If we can empty ourselves 95% and keep some as reserve, just in case a difficulty comes up that we haven't calculated for, and we need to deal with it.
Thank you, Grace. Dear Yolanda, is there a limit as to how many times we should give another cheek while being insulted by the same person? Is it okay to withdraw ourselves from such interactions?
Again, every occasion is different. I would say, again, to follow the peace of our heart in every single occasion. However, sometimes to keep our own peace, it might be wise to remove ourselves from the scenario. Let's say that we have a person who doesn't get it and they keep hurting us. We need to move on. If the history repeats itself, we just need to move on. And that's about it.
Thank you, Grace. You, Grace, yesterday you talked about being careful when we put our ego into a conversation. Could you please explain again how we can catch our egotistic thoughts in the conversation and how we can stop.
Yesterday we said that this sense gets sharpened through our nipsis, through our vigilance. So the more we empty ourselves to do God's will, the more we are capable of understanding when our ego kicks in. And how we understand it, it's a personal feeling. It's like I get a sense that I shouldn't say that. It's like you just feel it. And how can I describe that so that it's more obvious? Have you guys ever sensed an evil presence around you which makes your hair stand up? It's a similar sense. When we are to say something that will insult someone, or it's a manifestation of our pride, once we have practiced vigilance enough, we get a similar sensation, and this stops us, tells us, don't say that, it's not going to end up well. Don't throw oil in the fire. As simple as that. Should I say something more?
Thank you, Your Grace. When the Lord said in the Holy Gospel, "Be in the world, but be not of it," how does that relate to humility? How do we remain humble in a culture that is antithetic to humility?
Sometimes I tell people, if you don't know what to do, of course follow the peace of your heart, but also think, what would have Christ done if he was me? In every instant, like in the family, with the kids. What would have Christ done if he was me? Would he react or would he act? There is a difference between reaction and action. And why am I saying that? Because Christ was in this world, but he was not of this world. So Christ was living amongst us, but he emptied himself to do that. He was God and he became human. And then again, as a human, he emptied himself to do his Father's will, which was whatever it took to save us. So if I'm amongst you guys and I don't think of myself, but I think of how could I help you, this is me being in this world but not of this world. What does this mean? It could be when I'm in the university, I'm doing a master's in professional counseling, and you could say it's a very worldly environment, although it's a Christian university, still it's a worldly environment. So what do I do there? I try to do my best to keep my communication with God while I follow the classes, and I can tell you guys that in a very secular environment, you can have very strong prayers, especially when there is a reason behind what you're doing, when you know your purpose, or at least you know that you want to approach God and you're doing what you're doing for a reason. So Christ, after emptying himself, he was doing what he was doing in this world to get everyone else out of this world. And if we have a purpose, a similar purpose in this life, if we act in a Christ-like manner, this keeps us in this world, but doesn't allow us to become of this world. I don't know if this responses is this, yeah.
Thank you, Your Grace. Is it true? Yeah, sorry.
That's right. Keep going. No, keep going.
Is it true that the only thing the devil cannot emulate is be humble, or is humility?
That's what the saints say, that he cannot be humble. He can imitate it, but it's like having a narcissist imitating action-wise what it is to be humble. But yes, they can't. And why doesn't the devil, why can't he imitate humility? Because humility means that, as we said, we empty ourselves and we are filled from the Holy Spirit, we are filled up with God. He doesn't empty himself, he is full of himself, so he can't imitate that. It's literally impossible. And that's why he tried to take God's place, like Lucifer and all his angels, and they ended up being devils. This is who they are now. They can't empty themselves. It's like you have a sponge, you dip it in paint, it dries out, the sponge loses the quality of being able to absorb anything. So being full of themselves, the devils and the narcissistic people, they cannot absorb anything else. They cannot absorb God, and that's why they cannot understand the other people around them. They can't. It's impossible to understand. They only understand themselves. This is why when it comes to making up scenarios for us, if we had a narcissist fighting against us, they will give to us qualities that they have. So the example that I said before, you're a movie star, they told me you're a movie star, is what they would think if they were me. But it was not, because I'm not them. So, yes, I don't know if this makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So I think we've already answered this question, but it's interesting that it came up again. Is there a possibility that our humility or not responding to provocations can harm the provoker? Example, can someone, in parentheses, a narcissist, take advantage of it and not progress spiritually himself? That reminds me of when you were saying if you don't apologize to someone who's
Makes them, yeah. We need to have discernment when we deal with these cases, of course. However, you can't help a narcissist because they don't want to help themselves. And what psychology says and teaches is that the narcissists, they will never change because they can't see themselves. They don't want to see themselves. It's just that they are full of themselves and this paint in the sponge has dried out, so they can't absorb anything else. So, is this what they asked for?
Yeah.
Yes. So, what they say that the best approach to have with a narcissist is ignore them and move on. If you can. If they're in your face all the time, find a way that you're not affected. There is no other way around it. They will never understand. They will never understand.
Okay, this is the last, well, we have a couple more questions, but I think this is a rather long one, and I think we can just have a break before we eat. If we think about nepsis, and we use logic and our mind, how can we be sure in the end times we won't follow the Antichrist with our mind? As they say, they who follow Christ with the mind will fall, but with the heart will be saved. How can we use our heart more than our mind in your experience? And there's one little follow-up question after this one.
I don't know if I will answer the question the way someone might expect me to, but I will only say what I can say. So, again, it all comes down to the relationship we have with Christ, and the relationship with Christ comes down to how much we empty ourselves. And this is the true humility. What I wanted to say, though, is that it's interesting, but I don't know how many of you have the experience of a flock of sheep. The little ones, they follow their mother's voice. And it's very impressive that the little ones, they don't have logic. They will never have logic. They don't have developed everything that the adult animals do, even, and they don't get lost. They follow their mother's voice, and this is instilled in them to do that. It's an instinct. So that's why the gospel says that my own sheep, they follow my voice. It's not like Christ, like he has, I don't know what, like a big sign, this is me, follow me. It has to come from within. We can cultivate that by trying to empty ourselves. And when we get there, we understand what's right and what's wrong. There are stories about this even in our mythology, Greek mythology. So once Hercules had the option to choose between two, virtue and evil, and he chose virtue. This is the same dilemma, but our conscience will tell us what to follow. If we want to make our conscience sharper, we need to develop our connection with God through vigilance, self-emptying, prayer. That's about it.
In the last question, I put two together there, and I pretty much got almost all the questions answered. I love Elder Emilianos' advice on marriage. Can you give any advice general for married couples? And then another one, how do we tell between the monastic life and how can we tell whether we are called to the monastic life or the married life? Easy.
So, any advice for married people? Yes. You guys need to have the same spiritual father, because if not, sometimes you won't make sense to each other, and the spiritual father has to come in between and explain to the husband or to the wife what the other person means. And you need to have a spiritual father who understands you both. That's the only way out. This is my advice, and I have to keep it to that because every other advice comes from the spiritual father. And what was the other one? How can we
if we're being drawn to monasticism and to getting married and having kids, how can we tell which one we're being called towards?
Again, we need to talk to our spiritual father about it, but I wanted to tell you one thing here. And this one thing is that a person who could not succeed in the world, they will not succeed in a monastery. So don't become monastics because you want to avoid the world. Become monastics if you have the ability to, like the spiritual father will say that, but also because you're drawn there out of love and not out of inability to live a normal life. And why was Gerdas Emilianos saying that? Because the monastery, it's a community, the same way that a family is a community. And whatever weaknesses someone has in a family, they carry the same weaknesses in a monastery. So they will be revealed one way or another. The problem is that when these weaknesses, they are revealed in a small brotherhood, they can be an issue for everyone else. Not for this person who has these not very good qualities, but for everyone else. So our success to a point in a social environment indicates that when we become a member of a small community like a monastery, we can make it there. And this is another reason why Gerdas Emilianos was not rushing to torture monks. He would not accept everyone. In his monastery, there were all sorts of different personalities. However, people had to stay at least 3 years as novices with lay people, with lay clothes. And there were occasions when people were not born into the Orthodox faith and they were from a different country that they couldn't understand Greeks very well. They could stay as novices for 5 years, even up to 9 years. He would not rush into anything. Once someone becomes a monk, then you can't fix few things. They need to be fixed before that. And this is why he didn't have crazy numbers. He had big numbers of monks and nuns, but not crazy numbers. And he was not chasing people to become monastics. I learned this myself. Once I thought having a big brotherhood is a blessing, and then after having a small brotherhood I realized that the bigger the brotherhood, the bigger the headaches. God help us here. And I was happy with a small brotherhood.
All right, thank you, Your Grace. Thank you very much.
That's right. Thank you, Father.